happy to schedule everybody. So the important thing I always say to students, again, we were talking about this a little bit, is why are you in the program, why do you want to do it, right? And more importantly, why do you want to be a scientist? So we talk about the doctoral program, you know, either DBA or the DPhil in business research. But I encourage you not just to look at yourself as a doctor within business, but look at yourself through this program as a scientist, okay? Because that's what you're becoming. You're becoming a social scientist, right? And that's really what it means when you get your title after you do your defense. You are a scientist now. You should be looking at problems in a very scientific manner, scientific mindset, okay? And also ask yourself, what are you now? What are you going to become? You know, what do you want to become? You know, these are important questions to focus on. Some people jump right into a doctoral program and they don't sit back and think first off about the importance of these questions and identifying what their motivators are, and really that going through the program is a process of growth, and you will become something different than when you walked in, right? Oops, sorry, that's going backwards. So I said this just as a funny joke, looks like a scientist, acts like a scientist, must be a scientist, and then this was taken immediately after defending his thesis here. But, you know, Dr. Einstein said a few things, and the whole of science is nothing more than the refinement of everyday thinking. So being in a doctoral program, it's not like we're any smarter, we're not any smarter than other people, you know. It's that we still have, or you have this inquiring nature, but instead of doing it in an uninitiated way, you're doing it in a scientific way, and you're doing it in a structured way. Right? So, as he says, a refinement of everyday thinking. Anyone who has never made a mistake has never tried anything new, right? So don't be nervous when you're going through the program and when you're doing your research to look at new things and to go through stuff, right? Anybody who is nervous about that won't try anything new, right? If you don't try anything new, you don't take a challenge on, you don't take a risk, there's no growth, right? You have to, you know, coming to, a lot of people would not even come to their to a doctoral program like this because they're too nervous, too scared, right? The risk is too much for them. So you're already here, you show that you're brave, you want to do it, continue with that into your mindset when you're looking at problems and thinking of a doctoral thesis topic, right? So I put this up to say, who are my scientists? You know, when I did my doctoral degree, which was in the sort of like in political economy, that just took me into corporate social responsibility. I studied a lot of Austrian economics, and within Austrian economics, there's Professor von Mises and Professor Hayek. Dr. Hayek actually won the Nobel Peace Prize one year, and I really, for some reason, when I was reading their work, could identify sort of not just the work, but identify with the people behind the work that I was reading, you know, and especially Professor Mises, you know, you see him sitting there in a suit, a sort of old school type of professor. I always make the joke to say that no matter how old one of his students get, he's always referred to as Dr. Mises, right? You know, so, and I also have, you know, examples, like I was mentioning, my professor from McGill, Dr. Eager, you know, he's sort of like the image I have of a professor. So think, you know, one of the other reasons I put this slide up is when you're reading materials, right? Don't just read, like when you're reading articles for your thesis work, just don't read of course read the article and understand the content, but always keep the content in context with the author. When did the author live? What would they have read themselves? What does it mean for the authors that came afterwards? And try and understand some of the flavor of the author, some of his background, and get to understand. Like, you know, Professor Mises was a product of early 1900s Vienna, and then moved to the United States just after the war, I think it was. you know? So you understand the era that he lived and what he wrote and the context of that, and you need to do that with the researchers that you read, understand their background. And so when some of my slides, you know, when I show the picture, a quote, and I show the picture of the researcher, you click the researcher's picture and it takes you to their bio. So sometimes you can read the bio. When you read an article on somebody and it says Dr. So-and-so from MIT, search them on Google or search her on Google. Find out what their background is. Find out what they studied. You know, how did they get to the place where they are? Look at their other articles. You know, what's important for them. So understand what makes them tick as scientists, right? And those were the two books. Ludwig von Mises's Human Action is about this thick. And that was his big opus that he wrote, and he's famous for. And then this is a very good book to read, by the way. I would suggest that everybody reads it. The Counter-Revolution of Science, right? And by Hayek. The expression within the book is that what he calls scientism is that often we think through the modern methods of science that we're getting more exact about things, but it's just an illusion. And that what we need is to rationalize properly, and use logic properly, and not use the tools of science to replace proper thinking, okay? So it's a really interesting book, and I suggest that you read it. You can read Human Action too, but it'll take you at least as long as your doctoral program to read it. So maybe you can save that one for afterwards. This is Dr. Eager. I put him up here to be able to show everybody. So he was a bit of a light in my academic life, and that was actually at a conference in Toronto that we went to, which was about real estate. He was my real estate teacher. And he always, when he taught, took the everyday lessons that you were supposed to learn and was elevating them to do what he says. I didn't put it on the slide, I should put it on the slide. Connect the dots. Okay, and then he would say, connect the meta-dots. And what this is about is when I was deciding on my original topic for my thesis, I went to see him, and he said, Jeff, no matter what you do, make sure you connect the dots, right? And I'm like, okay, Professor, I'll make sure I connect the dots. By the way, Professor, what the hell do you mean by connect the dots, right? And he's like, what your job is, and you know, it's good, you want to hear this, what your job is as a doctoral student is to make connections that nobody else has made. So connect those dots that nobody else has connected, and that's where you're going to be a success, right? So this again is another take on originality, right? What is the original perspective of your work? So look to connect, and then when you say connect the meta-dots, which is the meta lessons of what you've been doing, so you have some important points that come out, and then connect them to other fields even, you know? So even though you're in business, you have a finding, what does it mean for other fields as well, right? So don't look at your stuff just in isolation. Try and take a holistic view across the faculties, across different industries, and when talking from a business standpoint, okay? So always keep that global mindset. Try not to get too myopic when you're doing your work. And that's difficult sometimes because we have our topic, we're running on our topic, we're working on our topic, you know, and we start to get narrow like a horse that's got the blinders on, right? And sometimes you got to sit back, which is sometimes I say to students when they've been working really hard on their thesis work for a period of time, I say, okay, you know what, take the next week off. Don't touch your thesis stuff, you know, go see a few movies, relax, you know, in order to give yourself, to rejuvenate a little bit, because that's when sometimes thoughts percolate, okay? The other thing which I'll introduce now is there's lots of different tools to use to write down thoughts. You know, there's mind mapping on computers, there's, you know, just basic word processors that you can use. There's your PDA that you hold in your hand, your phone, you can write down all your notes there. I'm old school. When I was going through, I carried this with me. You can see the coffee stains thanks to Dr. Eager's son. who ran into the kitchen when we were talking one day and said to his dad, I need the car, I need the car. And hit the coffee over and went all over my notes. And that was probably the worst thing he could have done in Dr. Eager's eyes, because he really scolded him on that. Those are his doctoral notes, you know. And but that's what I do. Any thought, and I carry it with me. I have it. If you have your briefcase for business, have a bright colored book, right, scribbler, that you have, that all your thoughts for your doctoral thesis go to. And the reason why I say have this envelope form. If you're somewhere and you want to write down a note and you only take your notes on your computer, right? What's the difficulty? Or your phone. Sometimes you can't take your phone out. Sometimes you can't open your computer or whatever. Sometimes you don't have it with you because you can't carry your computer everywhere, right? This is easy to carry, right? Or it's always close by. You know people who sing in the shower? Who thinks up new models in the shower, right? Who thinks up new frameworks in the shower? And you'll be surprised where a lot of your original thoughts are going to come from in the process of doing your dissertation. You're sleeping at night, this is next to your bed with a pen. Because in the middle of the night, you wake up going, holy smokes, that's the wow of my thesis, right? And then you wake up and you say, oh, that's a great thought. Tomorrow morning when I get up, I'm going to write that thought down because that's really great. You wake up the next morning and you're like, oh man, what was that? Right? You just don't. So do it. It sounds stupid, and I reiterate it. Now, what did I even do? I would photocopy this, right, so that it would be digitized into my computer in case this got lost, right? Quotes when I was reading some of the articles, and a really important quote. I wrote the quote out longhand and then put like the year and the author down. And the reason being is that when you read something, your brain takes it in a certain magnitude, right? When you write it down, it's like 10 times for your memory. When you write it down and read and speak at the same time, so you could be the crazy guy in the park who can't read unless his mouth is moving, right? So when you write it down and you verbalize it, it's even 10 times more that it sticks in your brain, right? But then, because the problem is, now it's getting a little bit easier because if you got them all in PDF on your computer and you remember just a key phrase, you can put the key phrase in and it'll search your PDFs as well, right? But there's always going to be these super, like I call them the high level quotes, those 10 quotes that you'll have in your thesis no matter what. You know, you're going to write those down, so you might write down even 50 of them and only use 10, but these are the key ones. You write them down and have them in hard copy. Because when you go to start writing stuff, what some people do, I write my thoughts out and then I go get my quotes to back up what I'm writing. Dr. Birdsell, as I mentioned, my study mate, she writes from main quotes. So she gets out 4 or 5 main quotes for a chapter that helps her to structure her thought, and then she writes around them. She uses them for punch, right? So people have different writing processes, but this helps. And yeah, and even just some papers that you come across, I print out some emails from some people that sent me that were critical stuff. Everything goes in here, logons to some software that I needed during my doctoral studies or whatever. So keep that in your, keep it close by for 3 years. You go to a picnic with your family, this comes with you. You're sitting in the park, this is with you, next to the boiled eggs. Okay? You're sitting there because you don't know. I mean, you're driving down the street, it should be on the passenger seat because you'll see a sign and it'll have a word on it. Okay? And the word will remind you of a thought and you're like, yeah, I gotta use that, but if you wait until you're out of traffic, you forget it, right? So while it's there, you grab your pen, you're at the stoplight, you write it down, you close the book, right? Those are the gems. I'm serious. It sounds really childish and maybe a little bit foolish, but those are the gems of your dissertation that just come at you. Maybe it's divine intervention sometimes if you want to think of it that way, but somebody gives you a gift. Make sure you can grab the gift and put it into your dissertation and it doesn't disappear, okay? Terry Tolsberg